All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ryan Sharp with the National Weather Service over here in Louisville. I'll get us started here. We got a lot to talk about. First, I'll start off with this wind advisory. We definitely have those winds of 45 to 50 miles an hour going on out there right now. And that's going to continue for the next several hours. Hopefully not be quite as intense as we get later on in the evening, but then we have other types of weather to deal with. And let me get to the next screen here. So, and that's going to be what I'm sure you all have seen is the upgrade to the high risk over far western Kentucky, and coming up with the moderate risk farther east into Kentucky, but still stopping roughly around the I-65 corridor in Kentucky and going all the way through southern Indiana for our area. So we are expecting severe storms to develop west of the Mississippi River this afternoon and become a line of storms as it comes through here. But we're also going to have to watch out for some discrete supercells or discrete storms to develop out ahead of that line, because those are going to be the ones that'll have good access to the instability that's out there, as well as the shear and rotation in the atmosphere. And that's where you have that potential for some intense tornadoes. And by intense, I mean EF3 or greater. So fairly good confidence there in the tornado threat. And let me skip ahead to that slide. Not quite in that order. Fairly high confidence tornado threat, medium confidence in large hail. Anytime you get those supercells to develop, you're able to sustain some bigger hail. Wind is the bigger threat, and we'll talk about each of these as we go through. Just a reminder what the risk levels mean. Moderate, widespread severe storms are likely, and you could have those long-lived intense storms. In my head, I'm reminded of, it seems like we always get these storms in twos, or these events in twos. And the biggest one I remember was back in February 29th of 2012. We had several tornadoes in the area, but then March 2nd of 2012, we had those the larger tornadoes. That's not out of the question here. When you get up to that high risk level, talking about widespread severe storms, and basically, the SBC even used the outbreak wording in their most recent discussion. So we're looking for that. Now, timing for when the severe threat's going to come in here in our southern Indiana counties and into western Kentucky, we're looking at this evening from 7 to 11 p.m., maybe even a little bit earlier as you get to far western Kentucky there, west of Paducah. Getting to the Louisville and Hartford area in that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. time frame. And then this system is really going to slow down after that point. It's not going to have the same push that our system did on Sunday night, where it was able to clear through most of the area, I think by even 2 a.m. This is going to slow down, and that's going to be part of the problem with the reason we have the flood concerns. I'll put a little question mark there at the end of the eastern Kentucky for after 4 a.m. because it really depends on if that stuff is able to push even that far east. They're still under the risk for severe weather as per that graphic, but that's only because they are, it just depends on how far it goes eastward. So looking at probabilities for tornadoes, you see that 30%, which is the reason for the high risk in far western Kentucky. The moderate area goes with that 15%, and then it drops off as you go farther east. The hatched area means that's at least a 10% chance of an EF2 or greater tornado. And I already talked about there is some potential with those discrete storms that form out ahead of the line for you to get some of your more intense tornadoes. Severe wind and hail probabilities, they did up that number for the severe wind over a lot of Indiana and into our Ohio River counties and into western Kentucky. They bumped that up to 45%. In this case, the hatched area means greater than a 10% chance of a 75-mile-an-hour wind or greater. And then your severe hail with being 1 inch, but the hatched area is for greater than 2-inch hail. And then the threat doesn't end. We continue Thursday through Saturday with some slight risks. And I'll say with this, it's mostly going to be on the southern side of whatever cells that do develop. You're probably going to have a larger area of rain that's close to where that stalled frontal boundary is, but it's probably going to be the south side of that line that has the better chance for some severe thunderstorms. We're not expecting it to be as widespread, obviously, because we're not in that moderate or high risk. But you should note that they did bump up that enhanced slide over western Tennessee with the Outlook update they did in the last hour. So they're getting a little bit more confidence as far as locations go for where severe storms are. And it really depends on how the storms line up tonight, where the highest confidence going to be when you get to Friday. We're thinking the best confidence is farther west in the Western Kentucky, maybe a bit of a breather for us as far as the rainfall, the intense rainfall goes. And then we get our chances back again on Saturday as that front tries to make a little bit more of a push through the area. With those multiple waves of rainfall coming in, the rainfall forecast hasn't changed that much. We're still looking at 10 to 15 inches over far western Kentucky, 8 to 10 inches in the center of the state, maybe a little bit less as you get into our Lake Cumberland counties, but that's still a lot of rain, and it's going to make some of the rivers and creeks swell very quickly. So we're going to have a combination of river flooding and most likely flash flooding. I would not be surprised if we have some flash flood emergencies. And then we'll transition those over after a while to aerial flood warnings. So this is going to be the biggest concern out of all this, as far as I know, because flooding is the #1 killer. So yes, the severe storm threat with a bit more intense tornadoes coming tonight, that's one key factor, but a second key factor is going to be the flooding rains. And I wanted to show you a model run just to show you one particular model and how its solution evolves over time, because I really want you to see the idea that this is going to be a prolonged event. So this is a model from the GFDL showing the current forecast. This is from about 18 hours ago. They run this twice a day, but it's a good 5-day outlook that is somewhat a higher resolution. So at least you can get a picture of the way storms could develop. This is not exactly going to be the way they do develop. But you see around 8 p.m. tonight, 0Z, so 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, a line trying to develop in far western Kentucky. It's trying to get into the Ohio River Valley by 11 p.m. And then there's that stalling, 2 a.m. Thursday, and just intense rainfall. But then we see some regeneration during the day Thursday, and then another wave Thursday night, and then Friday. But there's that little bit of a breather. Maybe it lifts a little bit farther north, but then you see all the rain coming into western Kentucky and coming into our area, just continuing with these heavy bouts of rain. So that's a key there. You're going to see quite a bit of rainfall from all of this. And that's the reason why we are very concerned about this. Is the reason why we issued that flash flood warning well in advance of when it normally happens. I'll continue through the slideshow just to finish up some thoughts there with the flood potential. So this has been slightly updated. They haven't published it yet, but they're going to trim a little bit more of central Indiana out of today's excessive rainfall outlook, the moderate level. But then you go into Thursday and you see that high risk. WPC does not put out a high risk very often, but when they do, that's when you have your flood fatalities. It's almost guaranteed that there'll be people that die from that rain. And that's why we're especially concerned. And when you have several days in a row of moderate risk over your area, like is shown in these graphs, we're very concerned about that. And again, I already talked about the high risk. That's widespread flash flooding. You're going to get your emergencies out of that. You're going to have issues. Here's the river forecast that were updated around lunchtime today, showing several rivers that have a greater than 30% chance of reaching major flood level, especially up there in Indiana, but a few of ours in the Kentucky basins. And again, if there's any kind of a swing in where that axis of heaviest rainfall is, if it swings back to the south, then you'll see more of those southern rivers come up quickly. We know the Green River rises fairly fast. You got Peaks Mill over there near Frankfort is already got a 30% chance of major flood. So the reason I wanted to show you that run of models is just so you can see how it really depends on where those axes of heaviest rainfall sort of set up. And it's all going to come down to what happens tonight, at least as a beginning point, where it stalls out. And then we'll be able to figure out things a little bit more from there. And we'll end it here with just some graphics that come at the end of all of our slide sets. Again, it's the #1 killer is flood fatalities. And it's people that think they can make it through low water crossings or make it through bridge. If you can't see the bottom of the road, there's no guarantee that the road is still there. So we just really, you need to be careful driving in flooded waters. And then we have nighttime tornadoes again tonight. We had several. Fortunately, they were all EF1s with the Sunday night event, and they came early enough in the evening hours that most people were awake. But these could be coming a little bit later, especially if it stalls out and we continue to have some issues around midnight or maybe a little bit after midnight. And then again, flooding at night. Sometimes you can't see what's going on with the road. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. I see some hands raised. And yeah, good call there, Andrew. It's not April Fool's Day. We can't give you good news. Sorry about that. This is definitely concerning. Just to put it in perspective, if we get 8 to 10 inches of rainfall at the Louisville airport, that already puts us in the top 5 wettest months of April on record. And that's only the first couple days of the month, first week of the month. The highest that we've ever had in April was 13.97 inches, and that was back in 2011. You may have remembered April of 2011 as being a pretty busy year across the Deep South, with lots of tornadoes going on during that. You should have Ashley, you should have these slides. They were sent out. They are on our website. You might have to refresh that. My first and last name, Killian, is Ryan, R-Y-A-N, Sharp, S-H-A-R-P. Aiden, it's not out of the question they could issue a PDS tornado watch for our area. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, when they use the wording that they've used in the past, that has come out. So we'll see if that comes out. If it makes it all the way to the Lexington Metro, I'm not sure. What most likely we'll see happen is similar to what happened last week, is we'll have a watch out, and then we may have to expand it over time. Timeline for Bullitt County. Yeah, I guess I can go back to the timing there so you can have that access as I'm answering your questions, and make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So Bullitt County, they're looking at 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. in that area. When the storms begin to slow around central Kentucky, that's when you're going to have the problems with the flooding, Ethan. That's a good question. We'll have to start issuing those warnings. Those are going to be in the middle of the night too. So if we get to the considerable or even the flash flood emergencies, the weather radios will go off for that. Again, Sean, for the best time frame for possible supercell development, that'll be out ahead of the line. So we'll see that line forming over the Wabash and steadily approaching us. But if you see some storms start to develop out ahead of that, that's what we're worried about. So this timing on here is more for the line coming in, that squall line. So I would say maybe an hour or two ahead of that is where we could have the discrete cells, but they're not going to be widespread. I think they're going to be isolated at that point, but that's where we're going to be watching for issuing any quick tornado warnings if we have to. Mark, you mentioned something about an analog. No, I'm just saying that in the past, we had the Sunday event with the tornadoes, the 5 EF1 tornadoes on Sunday, and then we have this one again. In my mind, I just remember that we've had those events where you had 2 in a row. So I wouldn't necessarily call it an analog. I'm just saying I remember that. Confidence, as far as the timing goes here, you see the confidence that the forecast staff has put out, medium. And then when you go over to the tornado confidence, anytime you see these numbers, it's pretty rare for us to get these numbers over this area. I think the last time there was a high risk anywhere in Kentucky, I believe it was March 2nd, 2012. So we're under a high risk over there in far western Kentucky. So yeah, that's pretty good confidence that we'll have some tornadoes. We'll probably have a tornado watch grant. Whenever that comes out, I'm not exactly sure. We'll have to see how quickly that line progresses to the east. Lucas, as far as Lake Cumberland, Dale Hollow area, that's into that area that I was saying is the question mark, whether it's able to make it all the way that far south. You're under the risk just because if it does blast through it, it could get all the way down there. But we have higher confidence that it'll linger a little bit farther to your north. High winds for Thursday. I'll have to check with my forecast staff on that, Mike. I hadn't looked at the actual wind forecast for what's going on tomorrow. Typically, when you have that much rain in the area, it's hard to get strong winds down to the surface, except maybe on that south side, and you might be able to get some down there. Flooding, Mike, right? Worse than the flood of 97, it's hard to say. We're going to have several rivers in moderate and possibly major. I should point out the forecast from the OHRFC only includes, I believe it's 72 hours of rain. So it's going to pick up a majority of this, but we'll continue to get more rain past that 72 hours. So this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. So that's going to continue to add to the river flooding. And I can only imagine the soils will be saturated. So any additional rains that fall will go straight into the creeks, run off very quickly into the creeks. Wind velocities, gusts outside of tornadic events. SPC does have the area in pretty high rating for damaging wind gusts. So yeah, you're talking about a hatched area, 10% chance of 75-mile-an-hour or greater winds, all in that area that's in the hatched area. So pretty much all of the Louisville forecast area has that chance for the higher end winds. Is MPING still being used and monitored? Yes, Jason, we get the reports in our operations area. Unfortunately, and this is perhaps something you guys can mention, we get a lot of false reports from that. So we have to be careful with everything that we see. There have been times where we'll get a tornado report in eastern Louisville when there's no storms on radar. And it's not something that's in our control. We can't do anything with that. That's a different agency that runs that. So it's just, we have to be careful with the reports that we get from that. And in general, speaking of reports, we definitely want to hear anything that you have as soon as you get it, because that will help us with issuing further warnings if we know validated reports are coming in. So let us know that. How do you feel about this event in your opinion, Aiden? It's, when you're talking about these amounts of rainfall data, knowing that flood fatalities are the worst amongst all of the weather events that we have, it can be scary. And we have not seen a high forecast like this in a while. Now, is it possible that maybe it hangs up a little bit farther north and we don't get quite as much tonight? Well, that's possible, but then we'll see wave after wave, and it's just a matter of exactly where somewhere in the vicinity we'll get these higher values. But it's a scary forecast. I'll leave it at that. How fast will this weather system be moving? Could we expect the storms to be around the Louisville area for an extended period of time? Mitchell, yeah, if it stalls out over the Louisville area, obviously that's going to be your answer to that question, but the severe part will be early on. And then as it's just transitions over to a rain event, it won't be quite as much. Some runs of the herd tried to show development between 5 and 8. Again, Sean, that's where you might see some of those cells developing out ahead of the line. So far, we're not seeing anything developing out there, and we'll keep an eye on that and see if we have to make the changes. What's the possibility that the high risk will be expanded more towards the I-65 corridor? They may do some slight tweaks, but I think that they're pretty much done making big changes for the day. Joe Sullivan, thanks for staffing the state EOC. Good luck tonight. Mike, I don't see all your question. Let me see if I can click on it. The water, sir, yeah, the water runs are going to include about 72 hours worth of precipitation. And they're going to keep doing that for a couple of days. The OHRD, the National Water Center, they're going to be working closely with us over the next several days to help us with our flood forecasting and to deal with that. So Peyton, with the tornado possibility, how important do you think it is to find a shelter with a basement rather than staying in a center room or a second floor apartment in Louisville? More walls
All right,
you can
ladies
get
and
between
gentlemen,
you and the wind.